Welcome back to Morning Art and TV. Let's delve directly into a Kickstarter conversation. Now today, if you didn't know, is World Children's Day. In 1990, Uganda ratified the Convention of the Child's Rights, and of course this means Uganda has an obligation to ensure that all children, without discrimination in any form, benefit from special protection measures and assistance, have access to services such as education and healthcare, can develop their personalities, abilities and talents to the fullest potential, and are informed about and participate in achieving their rights in an accessible and active manner. So Uganda has also ratified other international and regional laws which uphold children's rights. So we did pass the Children's Act and the Children's Act Amendment Bill, which was assented by the President, and we looked at this in the first half of 2016.
Despite this solid legal framework, more than a half of children under 5 and 38% of school-aged children live in poverty, deprived of many of their fundamental rights, for example, proper nutrition and healthcare, quality education, safe drinking water, and protection from violence and abuse at the same time. According to UNICEF, many of the problems children face today can also be attributed to poor governance characterized by corruption, lack of political will, and insufficient budget allocations. Our guest today is someone who is at the forefront of the fight for the rights of children. The Principal Probation Officer at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, Jan Stella Ogwang, and she joins us right now in studio. Very good morning. Thank you for coming.
Good morning to you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So help us understand, since some very wise leaders adopted the UN Convention on Children's Rights in 1989, later adopted in 1990, how have things been when it comes to the rights of children? Where are we coming from? Where are we right now? And where are we headed?
Thank you very much, moderators. Good morning, viewers. The rights of children have been protected ever since time immemorial. But what changed was having the convention in 1989, which came into force in 1990. And Uganda is one of the countries that ratified the convention. Not only the convention, we also ratified the 2 optional protocols to the UNCRC convention. That is option protocol 1 on the involvement of children in armed conflict, and optional protocol 2 on the sale of children, child pornography and child prostitution.
Was child sacrifice in there too?
Child sacrifice wasn't an issue then, but then the responsibility of protecting children still lies with us. When it comes to protection against harmful cultural practices, child sacrifice is covered.
Yeah, 5 years after the ratification, it became rife. So many children in the 90s, late 90s, was being sacrificed. I remember mothers and fathers telling us you need to pierce your ears or do this because if you have a piercing on your body, they'll shun you, they will not abduct you. How true were those allegations? Is it true that if you have a piercing, you will not be sacrificed? You're not the expert, but I think you've had the rumors.
I've had the rumors,
yeah.
But even then, we had a national action plan against child sacrifice. Because what happens when the convention is comprehensive, it looks at the broad categories of children's rights. We have rights to survival, that looks at health related, rights to development, that looks at education. Then we have rights to protection against abuse, neglect and exploitation. Then we have the right to participation. Now when the other issues come in the issues that come in that leads to abuse or violation of the rights of children, we have to take action. It becomes our responsibility as the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, the ministry that is responsible for children, to address the issues that are arising. As they arise, we should address, because the UNCRC is comprehensive.
So Jen, first help us break down this stereotype that has been thriving for two decades now.
Yes.
If a child has a piercing, would they be shunned by abductors who would want to sacrifice that child?
I've heard about that, and when we are developing
is it true, yes or no? No, if you've heard of it, is it true or no? Because it's a stereotype and many people believe in it.
But I think what happens when it comes to they that sacrifice children, they want something whole. If you can remember, when you're doing a sacrifice, for us the Christians, we never used to take we used to pick the best.
Okay, so where are we now, right now, in 2019, in terms of protecting children's rights?
We are doing so well in terms of protecting children's rights. Like I said, once we ratified the convention, the responsibility becomes to the state that has ratified it to domesticate it. And we've domesticated it in the Children's Act, Cap 59, as amended 2016. Once we domesticate it, the law that governs issues of children is the Children's Act. But like I told you earlier on, we have the 4 broad categories, and we have ministries, departments, and agencies that have the responsibility of protection of children and adults in this country.
All right. When I look at the newspaper this morning, it's unfortunate that you're waking up to such a headline. Quality of education drops further. And of course, this is courtesy of a report that was, released yesterday. And this particular survey says that this quality has actually dropped from 33%, which was, 33% to 39% to 33%, beg your pardon. That's the quality of education drastically dropping. And they're saying that the children who can read and count has dropped in the last 3 years. So from 39% to 33%, that drop has drastically happened in 3 years. Now, when I look at the statistics of the Ugandan children, we're saying that they comprise of 56%. That's about 20 million. And we're saying that, and of course, according to UNICEF, they're predicting that by 2030, the population will grow to 30 million. By 2050, it will grow further to 40 million, the current total population, so to speak. Now, my question to you will be with regards to the rights of children and access to education. Still according to UNICEF report, they're saying that only 40% of the children who leave primary school are literate. Does that concern us? Meaning 60% are illiterate. And according to this report this morning, they're saying that, children have to repeat primary 1. So this is totally against us, providing for that quality education, which is a fundamental right for every child. So what are we doing as a ministry to ensure that that is covered or stopped, so to speak, that we improve in that regard?
Thank you very much. Like I said, we have the right to development. That includes education. Minister of Education would be in a better position to say that, but I'm going to say what I can say. When we look at education, and for the children to enjoy any category of right, there must be a collective responsibility. What is the role of the parents and the role of the community? For instance, if you divulge deeper in the report, what contributed to the drop in performance? And what accelerates performance? Now, when you look at the children themselves and you look at the parents, what role do they play to ensure that the children enjoy the right to education? Because it's a collective responsibility. Unfortunately, if you found out from children what makes a good environment at school, it will be far off from learning. Learning is acceptable, is what we want. But what are those factors that facilitate smooth learning for the learners? And whose responsibility is that? We have teachers on this side, we have the parents on this side, and we have the learners in the middle. The teacher is providing education, but the moment the other factors that facilitate smooth learning are not in place, learning will not take place. And that takes us to the responsibility of the parents, the peers around the child, and the community.
So it's a collective, effort. Because it's worrying to see that only 1 in 4 children do, progress to secondary level, post-primary. So, like you're saying, collective
responsibility, because we have UPE and we have USE. What would let somebody not take use of that opportunity? And we also know what it means to facilitate the process of learning. Yes.
Factors that might facilitate learning, smooth learning for our children right there. So you talked about, there's a problem with health, Mala. According to the World Children's Report 2019, 3 out of 10 children are short for their age or stunted. In addition, 280,000 children are too thin or wasted, and more than 53% of children below the age of 5 years are anemic. This is worrying. Uganda
is.
has half of its population under the age of 18. So imagine that, Stella. Health is a big complication in this country.
But like I said earlier on, when you look at health, health is under the broad category of rights to survival. What happens? It still gets down to the parents.
What about the government?
We have health facilities. But you know, you will be surprised, you go to a community, you find a malnourished child, and the parents don't think it's a health issue. They think it's something they can manage from home. And that's why we have units in the hospitals that look at nutrition of children. If you went to any government facility, there's a unit that looks at the nutrition of children. Once you identify something abnormal with your child, it becomes your responsibility to get to the health facility and inquire.
But are these parents enlightened enough? Because, you know, there's also, you know, still sticking to the UNICEF report as I was looking through it, they're saying that 2 million, like you said, of the Ugandan children are undernourished. And one of the key factors is because 8 million of these children live in poverty. So how do we translate that? Where do we start from? Because it seems like you're saying, these parents have the responsibility to take these children to the health center. But do they even know that?
The parents, unfortunately, parents have abdicated from their responsibility. If you look at malnutrition now, and life before maybe 50 years ago, it was very rare to look at malnutrition. But the problem is, even when somebody identifies their child as having something small, that, okay, when they look at the children, and the children are not growing like any other child, they think it's normal.
Oh, they are cursed.
Or they are cursed. They start blaming. No, not cursed. They think it's normal, and they don't seek health services. The problem is uptake of health services. In terms of information, we have cadres at that level that give the information. We have community development officers, we have village declared community members in the health center 1 and the village level that should go checking on families and giving this information. We have health centers as close as health center 1 actually and 2. And when it comes to because everyone, one of the information they give them is whenever you see something that is not normal with your child, kindly seek for services in terms of health. The information, I mean, Ministry of Health is doing a lot of work. We have organizations that are supporting us. We have radios that talk about all these things because now we have information is there, but it's because they don't have the time. Some parents will, I'm telling you, even in non-urban setting, will not take on the initiative. When a child is coughing, when a child is not eating, they think it's normal. And then in terms of balancing the diet is something that people think it is not working. And I think the best is for us to get back to the parents, parenting responsibility, for somebody to know that the child is an holistic person. They should have everything. Because when you go to a health facility to give birth, this is information they give you.
What will it take for us to break through the cultural barriers? Because, you know, a majority, I'm sure you've interacted with the rural parents and even the urban parents. At times a child will cough, and instead of taking this child to hospital, they'll cook up some concoction or call someone from, you know, not a doctor, to look at this child. So what will it take for us to break that cultural barrier and all these beliefs that we've grown with?
It's for creating awareness, and awareness is endless. We continuously talk about it. The parents should be told that what their responsibilities are in respect to their children, and we should. And then the other people who give this kind of concoction should also be cautioned. And how do we caution them? Ministry of Health was coming up with a policy on contemporary medicine. Yes, that will take care of this category of people.
Okay. Mr. Gwang, you've said that parents have abdicated their role when it comes to taking care of their children, but I think they haven't neglected their role. It's because of the sheer poverty that we are dealing with in Uganda. Most of the families here in Uganda are actually spending 43% of their household incomes on food. Actually, so when it comes to health, they do not have enough money to send their school-going children to those health facilities to get the services they need. And when it comes to food, you also said that Uganda didn't have cases of malnutrition back in the day, but that's only because the climate that we were having back in the day was so good and we were thriving in terms of food. But in 2017, when the dry spell hit, we had more problems right there around May. So the national monitor did alert the government that by May we might have a very, very huge dry spell. So in August, government came out in northern Uganda and bankrolled 300,000 households right there. That's about 150,000 people with some money. $2 million, yes, to help them with food aid. If government was coming out to help these people, why aren't we coming out to help these children who are malnourished, and you can really see that their parents, because of poverty, cannot help their children access these services? What is the principal probation officer like yourself at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development doing to help our children in that regard?
In that, thank you very much. In that regard, like I said earlier on, in all health facilities, we have a nutrition unit, where once a child is taken to the hospital, they identify it's a nutrition problem, they are admitted in the nutrition unit. Yes, that is provided for, because we have nutrition units in most health facilities. Yes.
Near the schools?
Not near the schools. Of course, we have from health center, I think 4 or 5. I don't want to be very conclusive on that, but at least I know there are nutrition units in hospitals.
And these services, are they free of charge?
The services are free of charge.
All right.
And another one could be is it poor menstrual hygiene for the young girls? The president did promise to have some pads for the young ladies right there, but we haven't seen anything materialize in that regard.
In terms of pads, like I told you earlier on, it still gets down to the parents. Parenting is a very big issue that we have to deal with as a country. Because everybody assumes somebody should be able to take on their responsibility. Yes, those responsibilities enshrined in the legal framework, in the Constitution, becomes our responsibility.
I get your point, Ms. Ogwai. So let's not dwell on the negatives. Let's talk about the positive things you've achieved in the last 30 years with regards to protecting our children in Uganda.
Yes, thank you very much. When you get to the positives, what you've discussed is also positive. It's not negative to me. It is positive. But in terms of the 30 years, like I told you earlier, Ron, the UNCRC is comprehensive, and believe you me, we've domesticated it in the Children's Act, Cap 59, as amended 2016. Just like you raised, when it comes to Ministry of Education, which is responsible for the development rights of children, they have very good policies. They have a very good legal framework that looks at how a child should be supported in totality, right from UPE policy, USC policy. We have the BTVET policy that every child, whether should enjoy the right to education, whether formal or informal. When it comes to health, right to survival, we just mentioned it. We have policies with the Ministry of Health that should ensure that children enjoy their rights to survive or their rights to life. And these policies are then implemented by us, you and me, wherever we are. When it comes to right to protection, we look at protection against abuse, protection against exploitation, protection against neglect. As a ministry, we have very conducive policies that should look at responding to the issues of children or to the rights of children. When you look at the right of participation, which is the theme for this year for the Children's Day, how do we ensure that children get involved? Children are meaningfully engaged on matters that concern them. You've mentioned health, you've mentioned education, you've mentioned protection. How do we bring in the role of the child? Because, you know, people have always said, you're drumming the issue of rights, you're not looking at the responsibility. When we look at the right to participation, that is where the responsibility of children come in.
And also they are actually the key stakeholders in this.
They are the key stakeholders indeed.
All right, let's look at sexual and reproductive health. You know that the teenage pregnancy prevalence still stands at 25%. And it's worrying because when you look at that vis-a-vis early marriages, we're looking at 50% of women now got married when they were children.
Yes.
So in terms of interventions in that space, what are we doing?
In terms of teenage pregnancy, We don't have child marriage because children should not get married, for starters. In terms of teenage pregnancy, we have done a lot of work. We have a strategy, a child marriage and teenage pregnancy strategy, which was launched in 2015. We are actually reviewing it now because, like you said, other issues are coming up which we should take stock of what we've done and what we've not done. But we've worked closely with the ministries, departments and agencies that have a bearing or a component of protection of children to ensure that we reach the child, we reach the family, and we reach the community to have a protective ring around the child to ensure that teenage pregnancy is no more. Because we are working closely with the Ministry of Education to ensure that children stay in school, like you said, the dropout.
Right.
How do they stay in school? The strategy is very clear. It provides what should be done to ensure that children stay in school.
So, in a nutshell, to be able to protect the rights of our children, it's a concerted effort on Romeo, Mala, Ms. Stella Ogwang, the government, the parents, the teachers, anyone out there, the society.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Stella Ogwang. She's the probation officer and welfare officer right there at the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. We've been talking about children's rights, it being World Children's Day. We wouldn't shy away from such a conversation. Right about now, we're going to take another short breather and return with a lot more exhilarating content.